We were thinking we could maybe beat a Guinness World Record on the day. Big Sam Allardyce has been twice. Big Sam, really interesting. The people I met today made my afternoon great. What it's all about, the format for the lunch is that it's all about passion, friendships, and filling a room with people that, even if they don't know each other, they've got something in common with other people on their table, because they're all in the same industry. One might be with basketball, one might be with cricket. It could be any sport. The actual format is that we have no auctions, no awards ceremonies, no money raising events. That we try and include everything, so that if we're organising a lunch, once someone's paid for a ticket to come to the lunch, they don't then have to pay for anything else. The other interesting thing, we don't sell tables. So because the Podge idea was that if most events, in fact probably all events, you sell a table, and if there are 10 people on that table, the organiser is not particularly bothered who they are, because they've sold a table. Whereas with Podge, every single person is invited individually. It's a lot more important that the seating plan works, and that the people on every table go away thinking that was really interesting. The people I met today made my afternoon great. We also move everybody. It's chaotic, but we move everybody halfway through the lunch. So the odd numbers on every table change tables, so they've got to take their glass with them. Once or twice we've thought about stopping doing that, but everyone loves it because they've got a table with 10 people on it. Halfway through the lunch they're going to have a different 5 people, and they just get to know other people, which is the aim of the original Podge lunch, which was your question. It was very interesting actually, because my personal background was in design and digital, and we had a Podge lunch that for the design world that last year was 30 years old, and we had digital Podge, and they both were the same format as sport, but they worked really, really well. I would never have thought of making it work for sport. I didn't think I knew enough people. There's a guy called Jimmy Worrell, and Jimmy was on the course that I mentioned earlier, the MBA in football course in Liverpool. But he went and got a job at the Football Association, and he and I became client and supplier. I was the supplier, and we were building creative projects for the FA. At the same time, we, being my company, we did the identity for UK sport. We did the identity for UK athletics. We did the first ever Premier League website and Sport England. So we had loads and loads of sports clients. Jimmy was one of those clients. Jimmy and I became just good mates. We went out and had a pint one day chatting, and he said that he thought that the Podge lunch that I did for the creative industry would work brilliantly for sport, mainly on the basis that I mentioned earlier, that the others were all a bit formal. They're all about winning an award, and while the awards are being presented, nobody can talk to each other. So if you're on a table with friends, you can't have a conversation because you've all got to keep quiet. And Jimmy and I were saying it'd be really lovely to get a group of mates together. So by that time I had quite a few people in sport. He had more than I did. And we thought we'd try our first Sports Podge 20 years ago. And then for the next couple of years, Jimmy and I did it together. And then Jimmy said, I can't really devote any time to this, because he was setting up a new business called Leaders in Sport. So I took it on by myself, and my daughter got involved a few years later, and it became maybe broader, became less about football and more about other sports, and every year it sort of picked up that way. I honestly never thought it would still be going 20 years after that first one. We thought we'd do one or two of these and then call it a day. The theme is great fun. Very often when we're working out what the theme will be, it ties into something that's going on in sport that's a big event. When in 2016, it was the 50th anniversary of England winning the World Cup in 1966. So it felt like 50 years of the World Cup. That would be a really good opportunity to do something around sport, around football in particular, and in particular international football. So that was an easy one. So there's a lot of stuff going on around a particular sport, and having support, just knowing that there are people in the room that would actually support you. When it comes to doing a Podge, it takes so much time, so much effort. But if you can ring people who are at the top of that particular sport, when we did tennis, the Alexandra Willis, who worked there, she was just fantastic. She opened the doors of Wimbledon to us, said anything we needed, we could have. She even offered us the umpire's chair, in the middle of a tennis court. They're huge, but she said, would you like one of those for the lunch? And so we did have ideas of even putting a net across the middle of the room, but nothing is too stupid to consider. Every time our creatives come up with an idea, it doesn't matter if it's a crazy idea. If we think we can do it, we tend to say yes to everything. So, but there's no methodology to it. We're already planning next year, and we've got an idea for next year, but I can't tell you what it is. That is a really interesting question because everybody's invited individually, we know every person at every table. There's nobody in the room on the day that we haven't previously booked in for that place. The criteria, we change 50% of the guests every year. It's never been something we've done mathematically. It just always happens. So there's 50% of the people in the room will either be completely new or they've not been for several years. And then there's 50% in the room that would have been there the previous year. That seems to work really well because it means when we do things like the move between tables, the people who've been before, they know how it all works, and they actually help the people that are wondering what to do, what tables to move to. And in terms of choosing them, if there's a particular sport that we're covering, then we try and get some people associated with that sport, and then it's a question of who do you keep. I think I showed you the CMS earlier. There were 1,700 names on there. And from the 1,700 names for Sports Podge, you've got to end up with 300. It's not something that it's easy to get an invite for, and that makes it more desirable. There are lots and lots of people who've been. We had a boxing theme lunch, and we had Johnny Conti and Joe Calzaghe. But Joe Calzaghe was actually flying into Heathrow on an overnight plane, arriving in London on the morning of the Podge. So we thought that Joe Calzaghe might not turn up, but he did turn up, and it was lovely. And things like when we moved people around between courses, they were ringing the boxer's bell. We had a proper bell in there, for each round of a boxing. So Johnny Conti would be ringing the bell and everybody would be moving. Big Sam Allardyce has been twice, Big Sam. Again, depending on the sport. One of the ones that surprised me the most, one year we did, our theme was the Guinness World Records. I approached Guinness World Records and told them who was in the room, sent them a list and asked if there was any chance whether Guinness World Records could come to the lunch and maybe do something interesting. We were thinking we could maybe beat a Guinness World Record on the day. But they looked at the guest list and they said, there are 6 people in the room today, at your upcoming lunch, whose world records have never been beaten. And those 6 people, we would love to do something where we send in our team from Guinness World Records and give them an award on the day. So that became quite special. And I remember getting a phone call at my house. My wife answered it and I was watching Manchester United on the television. And my first reaction, because they weren't shite back then actually, they were quite a good team back then. My first reaction was to tell him to go away and I'll ring back later. And then my wife, she said, no, I think you should talk to this guy. He sounds important. And I went and picked up the phone and he said, hi Phil, it's Edwin. And I said, give me a clue. And he said, Edwin Moses. Oh my God, this is like the fastest man in the world, who is incredible. He was saying, "I've just heard about your lunch. Would you please invite me?" So we ended up with this group of people who all won this special award. Boris Becker was one of them as well. He was the youngest ever player to win at Wimbledon, and his record. So famous. There was quite a lot of them. They tend to be a group at every lunch, and usually they tie in with a theme. We're always thinking around venues and themes. In recent years, we moved to the Oval Cricket Club, and that was a good move. It's a light venue. You're looking out, and if there's a cricket match on during the lunch, you also get to watch cricket. So venues are always changeable. The format, we don't want to mess with it too much because it seems to work really well. It may be we've got a CMS that controls all the data on everybody that attends. Maybe one of our plans would be to update that because technology has moved on a long way. If we could make it a little bit easier for ourselves, that would be desirable. Otherwise, we're just planning next year's theme.